got the most wonderful clients. We really had, and they became like friends. They were lovely, lovely people.
The satisfaction you get from just putting a smile on people's face when they think there's nothing left to smile about.
You've got to do the very best for the person you're caring for. You can't do a rush job.
Emotionally, I get a lot back from it. Just the thanks, just the smiles. It's a very rewarding job.
More than 1 million people in Britain look after vulnerable and disabled people in their homes. Most of these carers are women. They're amongst the lowest paid workers in the country. We spoke to one carer, Janice, not her real name, who's been doing the job for 20 years. She told us that the time she's paid to spend with her clients has been squeezed.
In the space of half an hour, more often than not, especially in the morning, you may be expected to get somebody up out of bed, get them washed, maybe showered or bathed, get them dressed, give them the medication and breakfast. I like to ensure that everything is done correctly. I like to ensure that the people I'm working with are satisfied that when I've gone into their house, they've received the best care possible. So I do often run over, but we're not paid for running over.
According to the UKHCA, which represents home care providers, 3/4 of all visits last less than half an hour. Janice says that because she's not paid for going over the allotted time, she's earning less than the minimum wage.
How vulnerable, how frail were some of the people you visited?
Very vulnerable and frail. I might be working with people who have had strokes, who might suffer dementia, I've worked with a lot of people who've had MS, who are unable to do things without support, who need somebody there to do that. And they might sit and wait all day for you to come to ask you to fix something for them. You know, it's not part of the job, but you're going to do it and you're going to help them out where you can, and it will take you over.
According to the TUC, social care is the biggest sector where evasion of the national minimum wage occurs. Dr. Shireen Hussain at King's College London estimates that as many as 100,000 home care workers in England are being paid less than the minimum wage of £6.19 an hour. A major cause of that underpayment is that they're not being paid for the time it takes to get to their clients. A Unison survey suggests 58% are not being paid for their travel time. Many care providers say they're operating within such tight margins that they're struggling to pay above the minimum wage. They blame contracts drawn up by local authorities for driving down the prices. But local government disagrees.
I understand that people are concerned about local authorities and costs and so on and so forth. It's true that many contracts are given for 3-year periods, and quite a lot of things can change during that 3-year period, and so there will be some pinch points, no doubt. But it is essentially up to providers of care, to employers, how they manage their terms and conditions of staff, how they train their staff, what they pay for overheads and what they take as profit.
On the first call that day, I'd arrive at 6:44 and I left at 7:44, and then I go to the next client and it took me 9 minutes.
Until late last year, Deborah Claridge was a home care worker in Dudley. She's talking me through one of her old timesheets. It shows how her employer calculated her pay based on the minutes she spent inside a client's home.
You'd enter the property and dial in to say you'd arrived. So that would be electronically recorded then, the exact time that you dial in. And then you do the same process to dial out. And that would literally record exactly the time that you spent there. And that's what you would get paid for, no more than that. So no travel.
Deborah says she wasn't paid for her travel time. She claims that that means she was paid below the minimum wage. She's taken her case to HMRC, which is investigating.
I've always hated injustice. It's wrong. We should earn national minimum wage. That's the least you should earn. In fact, I think the wages are meagre as it is. But, you know, that said, you should be paid national minimum wage. Everyone's entitled to that by law. Why should these companies be able to break the law?
Deborah's employer disputes her calculations. In a statement they said,
The organisation of rotas is a difficult and a challenging task. Like many other home care companies, we produce rotas that detail care calls in blocks of time with an estimated travel time between these calls. It is our understanding that we have conformed with the national minimum wage requirements. All paperwork has been submitted to HMRC. We are awaiting their response.
Last week, the government promised to name and shame companies that don't pay the minimum wage. But some argue that's not good enough. The issue of funding must also be addressed, they say.
Enforcement is under-resourced, and too much of the emphasis on enforcement lies with workers bringing cases against their employer. There's also the problem of contracts. Too often contracts are drawn up and the price of that contract isn't high enough to actually pay the minimum wage. And for a long time now, we've been talking about this funding crisis in social care and using that as almost an excuse to not tackle the non-payment of the minimum wage. And actually, the minimum wage is a right, and we need to tackle this problem.
Janice loves her job too much to ever do anything else. But, she says, low wages are driving dedicated carers out of the sector.
The whole system of home care, it's undervalued, it's underfunded, and it's putting people at risk of neglect and abuse in their own homes due to huge staff turnover because of poor terms and conditions of employment. Unless more money is put into home care, and care is seen as a career, not just a job to do when there's nothing else around. The most vulnerable people in this society are going to be let down by this system, and they are.